Hi there, Corey Robinson here. I just presented to my business networking group, and there's a rule where you can't record there. So I thought I'd run it back and go through it one more time, just to kind of give an idea of what to expect in the real estate market here in the North Bay area in 2021. It kind of gives you more of a macro view as to what's going on. There's a lot of headlines flying around as we head into the new year. And my objective is always to clarify, not terrify. So I will run through the presentation real quick with you here. And there's about 2 hours of content that I boiled down. I will skip my highlight reel from last year and jump right in. So, a few topics I wanted to touch on: supply and demand dynamic, decentralization, interest rates, price forecast, and is there going to be a foreclosure crisis here in the Bay Area? And the main sources I go to for this are KCM, which is Keeping Current Matters. Both Brian Buffini and Tom Ferry, who are the top real estate coaches in the country, and also Dr. Lawrence Yun, who's the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but we need to get through the tunnel first. So we're recording this here on January 5th, 2021. So brand new year after a crazy 2020. Vaccines are starting to roll out, but they're not readily available to the general public. So at this point, they've been administered to most medical professionals, doctors, nurses, that kind of thing, and that's about it at the moment. So we have a lot of work ahead until we can get back to some sense of normalcy, but won't go down that road. We're just going to talk about real estate and kind of the trends we're seeing right now. Um, so the good old supply and demand equation, being in Marin County, Southern Sonoma County, there's just simply not a whole lot of new construction. So there's a lot of people looking to move out of the suburbs, and the supply has basically been remaining pretty much the same. And demand outweighs supply, which does what? It drives prices up. So that's what we're seeing. That's what we saw last year, and that we've been on quite a long run of appreciation here in the North Bay. And it doesn't look like there's an end in sight in 2021 as far as what I'm reading and seeing out there, and kind of just listening to the professionals on this one. Um, and here's a little visual in the upper left that shows you the dotted line on the top is 2019, and this is supply. And so you'll notice 2020 is the solid line, and it just shows how inventory was down significantly in 2020. There's obviously a dip in March, in April there, when we had the shelter in place take place, and that was for obvious reasons with the coronavirus, and then had a pretty healthy rebound and a really busy year in real estate, which is kind of counterintuitive to the environment going out there in the economy in general, with all the shutdowns. And on the lower right, you'll see this is specific to Marin County, just the months of inventory. So in a balanced market, you're looking at 4 to 6 months of inventory. And right now, it's, unless you're buying a $7 million or north of that home, there's really not a lot of inventory. So how they calculate that is, if no more inventory hit the market, how long would it take to absorb the current inventory available? And this is for single family homes. So say you're looking for a home in the 750 to 9 to a million range. Right now, if no more listings took place, it would take less than a month to absorb that inventory. And so that's just kind of a simple look at the reasoning why prices keep going up, is because it's kind of counterintuitive. I have a lot of buyers that come to me and say, "Oh, well, it's going to adjust. This year's going to go down, yada yada yada," and it just simply doesn't seem to be the case with a lot of folks wanting to move, which kind of leads me into the decentralization dynamics. And this is where we're seeing a lot of people leave the large cities like San Francisco, New York City on a more macro scale, trying to get more space spread out and have larger homes. And the rental trends are kind of a leading indicator. And so you'll notice the numbers In San Francisco, there's a ton of vacancies now, which has not been the case for many years prior to this. The rental amounts are going way down. And people are moving, 1, even 2 hours away. So we're seeing the outskirts of Sacramento. I have clients that moved to Placerville this year. And the thought is that they're going to have to drive to work, but it might be 1 day a week, maybe 2 days a week. And they're willing to make that longer commute if that means getting more house and more dirt and, living it's kind of speaking to a different lifestyle that I think will be the case for years to come. So this work from home dynamic is creating a whole different kind of wave of buyer demand in our market. And in second home markets like Tahoe, Palm Springs, Aspen, I grew up in Aspen, Colorado, and I'm told that Tahoe's been nuts this year. A bunch of people from the Bay Area are making Tahoe their permanent home. And similar in Palm Springs, Aspen, like I mentioned, it has a ton of Californians, Texans. I haven't been back in over a year, but I'm talking to all my friends and family back there. And those markets are just booming. You put something on the market and it'll sell for a price that it has no business selling for because people just want to be there. And those second home markets have become first home markets for a lot of people. So kind of touched on, the demand for more space, privacy, and land. On the other end of the spectrum is the condo market here in the North Bay. And that market has softened over the course of the last year. And it's kind of makes sense in that with coronavirus, people want more space. They don't want to be living in close proximity to their neighbors. So condos, with basically being on top of your neighbor has less appeal. And that's also caused people to want to sell. So we have a more supply of condos and less demand, and that's driven prices down a little bit. So we're looking at, 2018 pricing in the condo market. So that there's some opportunity there. I think that the condo market will return to normal, once coronavirus is in the rearview mirror. And that's something where, there might be opportunity right now. If you're looking to buy and, single family is not an option, you have some options there. There's also the dynamic of Silicon Valley and California in general, seeing a lot of people move just due to the tax laws here. And it's just a lot less expensive. Elon Musk moved out of the state. There's been a bunch of companies that are moving from Silicon Valley and otherwise to Texas and to Arizona and Washington. And, I think that's a trend we're going to be seeing, and it'll be interesting to see how it impacts Silicon Valley and the pricing down there and just what the numbers in California do in general. I mean, I have a theory, just being where we are, close proximity to beaches, mountains, wine country, San Francisco. I don't think it's going to go out of style anytime soon, but it'll be kind of interesting to see just how that kind of plays out. Another driver of this strong demand is the mortgage rates, which are just, I've heard historic lows like 15 times over this year. I have friends that have refied 3 times over the course of 2020. So right now rates are in the high 2s. And what we're hearing is the Fed rate is supposed to stay low, from now until into 2023 is what they're saying. It should stay between 0 and like 0.25%. So we're expecting rates to hover around 3%, and that should continue to drive, the buyer demand into 2021, which kind of leads to this, which is the price forecast. And basically across the board, projections are stating there will be appreciation. This is on a national level. So I think locally it'll be probably on the higher end from what I'm seeing with the number of buyers that are anxious, ready to go, but there's just simply no inventory. So when we start seeing the spring inventory roll out, I think people will be paying a premium to secure that. And in the spring is generally when we see most of the appreciation take place in our local market here. I do think that we'll see more inventory earlier this year, just because the old norms kind of went out the window. So there's Charlie. Hey, girl. All right after a little interruption from a little girl there. I just wanted to continue. So a lot of what we're reading in the headlines, and we'll probably continue to read in the first couple months of this year, is about a foreclosure crisis. And I get the sense that might happen in some of the more rural areas. I was exploring investment properties in Kansas City this past year, and the agents with whom I spoke there suggested that there's going to be a wave of foreclosures on the horizon, probably in 2021, due to businesses going out and shutting down. And I think here in the Bay Area, we're kind of experiencing a different dynamic where I don't think that is the case. I think the equity position here is different. A lot of people who own homes here have kind of ridden a long wave of appreciation versus 2008, where people were underwater. So now they have equity in their home, and rather than walking away from a property, they'd sell it for a profit. If there are foreclosures where people maybe over leverage themselves, the market will quickly absorb those, and I don't think that it will ultimately impact pricing or lead to price declines. So foreclosure crisis is generally caused by economic distress or lack of equity, and I think the economic distress piece will play a factor. And it's, I'm not trying to be Pollyanna-ish about this whole situation, because there's a lot of hardship going on, and there will be people losing their homes, whether they sell it or whether they get foreclosed on. So if anyone wants information on forbearance, that's kind of another topic that is a whole conversation in itself, but I have some good resources and can point them in the right direction. So give me a call if that's the case. Also wanted to touch on Marin County has the lowest unemployment rate of any county in California in November. So the state unemployment data released on Friday showed Marin had an unemployment rate of 4.7% in November, compared to the statewide rate of 7.9% and the national rate of 6.4%. So all things considered, the unemployment is better than most projected early in 2020, as we were heading into the pandemic. So that's a good thing. And hopefully, help is on the way with the vaccine, and we can return to some normalcy at some point soon here. And this is a quote from Lawrence Yun, again, who's the chief economist of the National Association of Realtors. And he says, "Such a frenzy of activity reminiscent of 2006 raises questions about a bubble and the potential for painful crash. The answer, there's no comparison. Back in 2006, dubious adjustable rate mortgages taxed many buyers' budgets. Some loans didn't even require income documentation. Today, buyers are taking out 30-year fixed rate mortgages. 14 years ago, there was 3.8 million homes listed for sale, and home builders were putting up about 2 million new units. Now inventory is about 1.5 million homes, and home builders are underproducing relative to historic averages." So back to the old supply and demand. And there's my why. My little girls, you got to see Charlie earlier. That's all for today.